What's up, geeks? So I wanted to talk about something with you guys that I had mentioned briefly in my previous video, but I wanted to dedicate a whole video to it, and that is the future of operating systems for Apple. I'm pretty sure they've been working on this for the last 10 years, something like that. But if they're not, I hope that they're listening, because I really think this is going to offer a solution for all of their devices that are starting to look a little long in the tooth, so to speak. So if you're into that, hit the like button, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss. I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granted Geek Show. Okay, so operating systems on Apple devices have been great at times, fantastic, best in the world at times, and they've also been extremely boring, but always efficient. I think that there's a solution for this, and I hope that Apple has been working on this for a while, because it is something that would take a while to develop. So if they're just starting on this, it would take several years. And that is, it's finally time for macOS and iOS to merge. But I do not mean that iOS is going to be running on Macs, okay? That is the problem that we have with the iPad. You see, the iPad, specifically the iPad Pro, is not an iOS device. It is a Mac in disguise. It is a Mac pretending to be an iPhone. When you look at what the iPad Pro can do, if you want this case, by the way, a lot of people want to know where I got this from. It detaches magnetically. Check that out. Boom, I can use it in tablet form. Anyway, it's got the trackpad and all that. I'll leave a link to it down below. When you look at what the iPad can do, it is a very pro device, okay? But it keeps trying to be an iPhone. So what I mean by a merger of macOS and iOS is that macOS basically stays the same, but that it gets optimized for touch. And I think this could very easily be done just by making buttons a little bit bigger. Look at the macOS dock, right? It already has apps that are shaped exactly like they are on the iPhone. So just opening apps, that would be fine. You're going to run into some issues with some smaller elements of software that you're used to getting to with a mouse that you would then have to use touch inputs for the iPad. But I think if Apple took enough time to think about how something like that could work, they could reface macOS so that it would still function pretty much the same for Mac users, but that it would now be touch compatible in every way. I've heard a lot of responses on my last video about, oh, well, just make the file system better on iPad, or just do this on iPad OS and that on iPad OS. Let's just get away from iOS as a whole, okay? iPad OS is just a big scaled up iOS with a little bit more functionality. The chip in the iPad Pro, especially if this new iPad gets the M4 chip, it can handle macOS. Oh, well, it doesn't have the thermals and the fan. The MacBook Air doesn't have fans. It can run macOS. Let the iPad run macOS. Just find a way to allow us to interact with all the smaller elements of macOS via touch. If they can do that, they will have a winner on their hands. Now, the OS as a whole could bleed down into the iPhone if you really found a powerful way to make macOS run on the iPhone, because again, these iPhone chips are no slouches either, okay? I don't know if they'd be able to run like full-fledged logic, and then it can get hairy, because then you're dealing with like locking certain apps in the operating system because it just can't run on the hardware. But I think what might be a little bit smoother is if they just make a certain cutoff, like iPhone 13 or iPhone 14 and above. Any other iPhone would not be supported. Now, I know Apple loves toting their, oh, we still support devices that are several years old, but guess what? That's not great, because as long as you keep holding on to past devices, you're limiting the potential of current and future devices. So break it off, right? Maybe everything iPhone, and listen, the iPhone will still be great for iPhone 13, 12, 11, even iPhone 10 users still to this day. It'll still work. It'll still run iOS. But if you want what is next for iPhone, you got to have an iPhone 14 or later, because it's going to have at least enough juice to run an operating system as complex as macOS. Now, is this going to be an easy task? No. Are we getting into kind of conceptual area versus what's actually realistic to bring to something like iPhone? Yes. but that's iPhone. In terms of the iPad, I think it's a no-brainer. You've got the space, you've got the thermals, you got the big Retina XDR display, you've put the M3 chip or the M2 chip in it, potentially getting the M4 chip very soon. Stop holding the iPad back. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to unleash the iPad by giving iOS Logic and giving iOS Final Cut and giving iOS all these other things. We want Mac OS. That's just what we want. We want Mac OS. Keyboard and mouse already there. USB-C already there. Just add another one on the other side, maybe. Okay. It's got cameras on it. All the things that we need. Face ID. It would be the first Mac OS device with Face ID. Be excellent, right? Who wouldn't want that? For those professionals who are edgy, right? They want to push the boundaries, but they're still afraid of switching to iPad. Now they can feel comfortable because Mac OS is on the iPad. They can do everything they were doing before, but now they have an added input method, which would be touch. Okay. This would probably have to support M series chips and newer, the kind of chips that would support Mac OS, as we know that Mac OS runs on M series chips. I think Apple, if you're wondering why are people still complaining about the iPad Pro, we've given it Pro software. What's the answer? Just more Pro software? No. iPad OS is not a Pro operating system. You need Mac OS, which is a professional level operating system. Once you get that on the iPad, I promise all the complaints about iPad will be gone. Now, will it be clunky? Will it be probably kind of glitchy? Yes, but I think everyone at this point, after over a decade, roughly a decade with the iPad, we're ready for that. We're ready for a little experimental. You just had the Vision Pro out. You know, the Touch Bar, I think, was largely customers' fault because they tried to introduce touch to the Mac and say, hey, touch could maybe work in a Mac OS environment. And everybody's like, no, we hate it. It's the worst thing ever. You can look at my videos. I've never hated the Touch Bar. I think it was bad in terms of software, but that's what this video is about. It's about getting the software to a point where the hardware is no longer held back. Now, the Mac is not held back at all. Mac OS is fantastic for it. iPad is held back. iPhone is not even really held back. I mean, now you can do all kinds of cool video formats on iPhone. It's great, you know, and you can plug in USB-C to your Mac and transfer your ProRes files, which is awesome. So I wouldn't even say the iPhone is held back, but that's if you want to like save the iPhone in the era of AI and AR, okay? But the iPad has still not reached its full potential, which that sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a really, really great thing. It just goes to show that the tablet is still the supreme physical device. I said this in my last video. Tablet is where it's at. It's modular. You can hold just a big screen. As it gets thinner and lighter, it's going to be even better. You can dock it, right? You can plug it. That was probably really loud for the mic. You can plug it into an external monitor, right? But just give us Mac OS enabled for touch. Let me know if you think that's a good idea down in the comments section below. I'd love to chat it up with you guys. As always, I say it so much. Like the video if you like the video. It's really as simple as that. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss. I'm Chris Grant Jr. It's the Granite Geek Show.